We'll start very briefly, though, something not in my comments, and going to a little bit to what George Meyer was talking about. We were worried about impacts to sportsmen of this bill, and I will say there has already been an impact to sportsmen on this bill. I was offered to go goose hunting this morning, and instead I'm in here in this room. So
we all have choices in life, Tracy.
Let me touch on hunting just a little bit because I don't have sportsmen in my comments. We knew George and some of the others were covering that. I've been a hunter since I've been 13 years old. 22 years of my career I've managed a very large public hunting program. And so I know how hunters think and know them very well. One thing I will add, and I think George hit on it very briefly, is that if you're closing an area and opening an area and things are going back and forth, we get confused about when it's open, when it isn't, even when they're posted and things, and it makes us stay away from an area. So even though an area might be open, we're confused. Was it open? Was it closed? It's just the way hunters are oftentimes, and they're afraid of getting arrested. If they're not sure, well, I checked on the website, it looks like it's open. So just word of warning on that. It will result, even if the land is open periodically, to a lot less hunter use out in situations like that. I want to very briefly just touch upon a general comment. I get a little concerned when we're doing legislation that is dealing with such specific issues, especially when we're legislating solutions to very specific issues for specific private businesses. I think that also, if we do that too often, it'll become unmanageable, and I think it promotes a culture of government dependency on folks, and it stifles entrepreneurial creativity. We all have businesses, we all deal with tough situations, and we got to figure out solutions to them, and I think that's the backbone of one of the things that makes Wisconsin great. So that being said, some of my specific comments: I'm concerned about the legislation does not give a lot of sideboards on what the agreement is between the binding company and the DNR. It just says they're going to agree on some things, and sometimes when you do things that way, there's not a lot of direction. Things can be confused, and they can cause delays in the permitting system and cause confusion down the road. I really want to encourage the company and folks to work together with the DNR, work together with the tribal governments, the local counties, the communities, get the local folks together, especially enforcement people, and come up to a solution to this. Nobody wants this criminal activity up there. It's abhorrent. We all agree on that. We've got to figure out a way to keep this from happening and keep anybody up there safe. And so we agree with that very strongly. It's the mechanism on how we do that. How do we achieve that is that, to us, is so important. I'm concerned about the enforceability of using this method to try and keep the criminal activity out. I worked for many years at a large Indian reservation out west. We had a large closed area, hundreds of thousands of acres, guard stations so nobody could drive up into this area. Nobody's allowed up there but tribal members. We had very, very large Mexican cartels coming in growing marijuana. The closing of the property didn't keep those people out. The closing of this area won't keep the bad element out. It'll certainly keep the good people out, but it won't keep the bad people out. The only thing that solved that is when enforcement folks got a plan, worked together, and worked cooperatively to make a solution to the situation. And that oftentimes means the state, the feds, the counties, the tribes, everybody that has authority in there. And I really want to emphasize that. Ultimately, that's the solution to this issue. One of my huge concerns also is our organization is a nonpartisan, science-based organization dealing with wetland issues throughout the state. When we're dealing with situations like this, it is critically important that the science is clear and transparent, and that means oftentimes the way the scientific method works is when people are able to review each other's work. So when there's activities going on, it's clear what's going on, what your methodology was, what did you see. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are or where you are, and it's not necessarily a trust issue, it's just the way science works. So we need to make sure that there is access to this land to help make sure the scientific process works efficiently and effectively. We shouldn't be arguing over the science on this. The science should be clear, and a well peer-reviewed scientific process will allow that to happen. And we really want to make sure what happens up there to keep the places safe allows the access necessary for that peer review. I've been up there a lot this summer. I've been hiking up a lot of these lands because when I deal with an issue, I don't deal with it from an office. I have to live it. I have to be up on the property. I have to know it. I've been up there hundreds of hours, mostly on weekends in my own time, hiking around there. So I can talk intelligently and understand the landscape, understand what's out there and how the whole place works. If I didn't have the ability to do that, I wouldn't be able to intelligently help review some of the documents that are being put out and help address the scoping needs and the issues that need to be done to make sure the permit process is completed in an adequate manner. So it's very, very important that folks that need to review these things have access to these properties. And so I'm very concerned about that. I know there was one well-respected delineator that was hired by, to review the bulk sampling, and she made a courtesy call to the delineator and was told, I guess received a letter saying if she went on the land, she'd be criminally prosecuted. She now has got to put her comments into DNR saying, well, there's questions in the application that are unclear to me, and it could have been answered simply by visiting the property. I couldn't visit it, so now here are my questions, and it'll delay the process. People will probably have to go up there and address her questions by looking on site again and checking some of these areas. All of that could have been avoided if there was a logical way of access to the properties for review. We can't be afraid of review. Review is critical to the scientific process. And the last thing, just a personal thing from me, when I read the bill as well, I was a little taken aback. I don't know how you guys feel about private property rights, but when I read the section that says an iron mining company can negotiate with DNR for the access issues on this property, and then the landowner's stuck with the tax bill and he isn't involved in the negotiation of that activity, that bothers me. And hopefully maybe there is, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know this issue enough, but reading the bill, I saw that there was nothing about landowner involvement in the discussion on what happens on the property. The landowner entered into the MFL on their own, wanting to do this, making their own decisions on their own land about access and tax breaks, and then that gets changed according to this bill when they don't have input on that, and that really worries me. So, in conclusion, I just want to make sure that I would really encourage us to set this aside and let's get the folks talking. There needs to be a plan with enforcement involved, whether this land is closed or not. Closing of the land is not going to make the place safer per se. Let's get those folks talking, working together to keep the criminal activity out of here, keep it open to the legitimate people that want to utilize these areas, and leave it in the state that it's at. So thank you so much for that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to receive them.
Tracy, I would just comment that early part of your comments when you comment bill is very specifically directed at Chapter 295, the iron mining laws that we have here in the state of Wisconsin. And I agree with you. I would really prefer not to do it that way also, but to a certain extent I feel like this has been foisted on us in a way that we had to deal with this issue, and we think it's very specific to this iron mining permit, so we ended up doing that way. I would say this. You heard the previous testimony from Fred Kelly Grant when he talked about what happened out in Idaho. I would hope that we don't see that happen in Wisconsin, because if it does happen in Wisconsin where you see trees starting to be spiked and stuff like that, we'll probably have to take action on that. Now, hopefully that won't happen, but I can tell you that I take the workplace safety part of it very seriously, especially in dealing with natural resources. So,
As do I. Thank you very much for that. Let me just add one thing to that. In my all summer long being up there, my hundreds of hours on the property, and I've especially hiked in areas that are county owned, the South Slope area. In all the summer I've been up there, I have never run across one individual out on those hills. And I put in hundreds of hours out there. I've never encountered another individual. And the reason was I was not near the drill sites. I was not near those hotbed locations. I never even saw one other footprint in the mud anywhere in those hills. Very, very little use away from the hotspot areas. So I think getting a coordinated enforcement approach to deal with this stuff, I take these issues as serious as you do, is the best way. It needs to be done no matter what.